I miss Enfield. Since Hypergriff is taking the time, why don't I make something from the game while waiting? Plus, my Chen is getting lonely, aren't you, Chen? First, we need a model. For this video, I've prepared a sculpt of our Technonan Xaihi. But since I'm only going to use a paintbrush, I've modeled her a bit simpler than I used to. After getting her ready in Lychee Slicer, I'll send her away to my 3D printer. The model is fresh out from the printer, and I'll use a hairdryer to easily take off the supports. Before I start painting, I need to prepare the surface first because, as you can see, it needs some work. I usually sand off any support marks by using a lower grade sandpaper that I cut into smaller pieces. It's also a good idea to test if the parts fit with each other. Unfortunately, I broke some of the parts, which I then had to fix using a pair of pliers. But don't worry, I already fixed the model so that the holes have more clearance for the inserts. After confirming all the parts fit well, I can continue sanding using a higher grade sandpaper. I also did a finer grade for skin parts to make it smoother. Next, I'll use a primer to see if I miss any cracks, and it will help the paint to stick better to the surface. You can use the hobby types, which are usually pretty expensive. Or you can find a cheaper alternative. I couldn't find a canned primer spray, so I have to cheat by using a primer that I already prepared beforehand. You could see that there are still areas that need more work, like these lines shown here. There are a lot of paint brands and types to choose from, like Mr. Hobby, Tamiya, Display, and Gaia Notes. But for this video, I'll be using a brand called Vallejo, which was the first brand that I've used to paint my prints. I'm only going to use these 5 colors to paint Xaihi, and I think that's enough. I'm also pretty bad with mixing colors, so I use this site called Tricolors to help me get the colors that I need. But sometimes the color combinations get a bit funky, so I use another acrylic paint combination method by drawmixpaint.com and just modify from there. To begin, I like to do brighter colors first, like white, red, and yellow, then build up to darker colors like green, blue, and black. As you can see here, the grey base is still visible after painting a layer of the skin color, so a lot of layers are needed for this part. I have moments where I will mix paints and somehow arrive at a color of a different part. For example, I tried to find a good color for her sash here, but I suddenly end up with the color of her hair. This happens often when I'm mixing paints. I also need to consider the consistency of the paint I'm applying. If I use a paint that is too thin, I need to apply a lot of layers. If I use a thicker paint, it will not look as smooth and there will be a lot of visible brush strokes. So it's important to find a good consistency. I learned that when painting details on Gunplas or garage kits, it's easier to paint the lower details first because it's easier to mask when using an airbrush. But for painting using a paintbrush, I find it easier to paint the upper details first so I can easily clean up what's underneath. All of this depends on the details though, like how big or how deep the details are. After painting a lot of layers for the head part, I can finally paint her face. I usually hand paint face details using enamel type paints because it's easier to redo. However, this is different since my paints are all the same type. After coloring the figure, I'll finish it by spraying a matte coating to protect the paint. What I'm using here is Mr. Hobby's water-based matte finishing spray. Alternatively, you can use a normal clear matte paint spray. And she's done. I think I did a good enough job using only a paintbrush to paint the figure. There are still brush strokes here and there, but it's been a long time since I used a paintbrush to paint, so I take this as a win. Now, Grumpy Chan here has a friend. If you like to have this Xaihi model, you can get it on my Cults 3D page, or you can get Chen here for free. There are also amazing models out there like this Hoshiguma by Naotaro and Dolly by T000. I hope you enjoy hearing me talking while I'm painting, and I hope you learned something from this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!